Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another session of Expert Insights Live. Uh, Today we have Conrad and Luca back on our show. Uh, let's firstly check whether we are live or not. So, if everyone can comment, just let us know if you can see us, if you can hear us. So, as soon as we have at least one or two comments, we can then just go live and we can start talking about the plans that we have for today. Can anyone see us? Can anyone hear us? Hi, hello, anything?
Well, we can. I'm not sure we. I'm not sure the two of us count as everybody. That would be a bit excessive, I think.
In our small world, I'm pretty sure it does. You know, so well, let's hope that we are live and people can see
Yes.
us. So, welcome again, Luca, Conrad. Uh,
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
should we start with a small round of introduction? Who you are, Luca and Conrad? Can you just introduce yourself?
Coran, should I start?
Go ahead.
I'm Luca Massaron, a data scientist, having worked a lot of time on data and data problems, and as you may know, quite passionate about Kaggle. It has been over 11 years. I started participating in competitions, and I'm greatly proud to have contributed to the Kaggle Book, which summarizes such a long experience together with Conrad.
Hi, I'm Conrad. As you probably figured out from context by now, I am also a data scientist. Although around the time I started making a living crunching numbers, it wasn't even called data science. It was called. I think my first job title was something like quantitative analyst. And I actually had to correct them because they made a typo in the first version of the contract and wrote it with a double N. I'm like, I do medieval manuscripts, but this is going a bit far. Yeah, I have a bit of a thing with data because I make a living crunching numbers in my spare time, precious little that I have of it. I spend a lot of it on Kaggle as well. In other words, I am one of those miserables like Luca. You just can't get away from it. Once you start, keep your kids away.
You cannot stop.
Right?
It's impossible.
Early on, just when I thought I was out, they draw me back in.
Yes.
We got a special insight from Conrad that he's been correcting people right since his first job.
Earlier. one of my instances in my education was, I think, was like 7th grade or so. So must have been like 15 or so. And our teacher was the one that earned me a visit to the headmaster's office. I corrected our teacher. She was drawing. Tinsy, we need a bit of context. Poland has had a slightly dynamic history, which means we've been shifting on the map a little bit. As in, borders changed pre-World War II and after. And when she drew the map, she omitted one rather important bit, which I pointed out. And she did not take very kindly to that. Ever since then, it's only been escalating. So way longer than first job.
So, okay, I'm really glad to see that we are online and people can see us.
Hello.
Yeah.
Conrad, we will keep your special insights for our special session independently when we connect together. But for now, I would really like to know what is this book? Like, what is different in the latest book as compared to the old one? Now, there are two Kaggle books. One is a Kaggle book. The other one, the new one is Kaggle workbook. So, Luca, do you want to have a go at it first?
Yes, actually, our idea of writing this Kaggle workbook started from realizing when we published the Kaggle book that something was missing, and not because we didn't thought of, because there were space, and the Kaggle book is quite thick. Already, I remember a lot of readers posting pictures of a book on Twitter and mentioning, "Oh, what's too huge?" and weighting it and measuring it with a caliber. It's incredibly big. Wow, how can we do? It's stuffed of knowledge, but there weren't enough practice in it because we mentioned a lot about Kaggle competition, techniques to be used, how you can use for your own advantage, for your career and your personal development, Kaggle. But we didn't enter into any competition inside the book, into any detailed example. And so having the Kaggle workbook, written was the right way to show also the practice. And basically inside it, you will find 4 competitions, 2 dwelt by myself, 2 by Karat, where we try to figure out how to reach the top leaderboard by using insights from discussion, from notebooks, and from our own experience. So it's a way for every Kaggler to leverage what we know about Kaggle and learn by themselves through practice.
So,
If I
Conrad, do
may,
readers, is it important for readers to have both the books, or is it okay if they just have one?
I think it depends a little bit on your personal approach.
Mhm.
Because I grew up in the 90s. So when I was learning things online, excuse my French, but typing to somebody RTFM, I think everybody knows what that means, was a perfectly normal thing to do, which nobody took personally and took offense with. Times have changed, and I am very, very cognizant of that fact. So certain things that were okay 20 plus years ago are not okay now. And explaining things to people in that manner, no. Times are changing, and we have to adapt with them. So I think, bluntly speaking, if you are closer to me in age, and I turn 44, it's probably fine. You'll probably be fine with just Kaggle Book. If, on the other hand, it's different style that you prefer, you want a little bit of guidance. It's not like we offer prepackaged solutions. I mean, this is Kaggle. What was a fantastic prepackaged solution a month ago or quarter might not be one anymore. That's not what we're doing. But we are showing you a little bit. It's less of a treasure hunt. It's more of a map. How do you figure out in this landscape? How do you go? What are the safer roads? What are the things that you better stay away from? And yeah, there are some sections which, in 16th century style would have been mapped. Here, there'll be monsters. That's what we try to do, because some of our experience, I think, can be useful to people. Obviously, everybody has to make some of their own mistakes. But those are the most durable lessons. But with the experience Luca and I try to distill both in the Kaggle Book and Kaggle Workbook, I think we can open you to be creative and make your own mistakes, but use some of ours as well as a learning exercise.
Fair enough. I remember after we published the first book, there were a lot of people in our Discord community who said that now we are aware of what Kaggle is, but how do we practice more? What do we do? And that's when Luca and you came up with the idea of, let's provide them with this treasure map and let's create a workbook for them. So this has actually been a book that has been literally asked by the community that this is what the book we need next. So yeah, exciting times that this book is now ready. It only feels like 5 or 8 months away before this, when readers were asking for such a book, and we now have this ready for them. And this book publishes soon. In fact, tomorrow it publishes. So yeah. By the way, if anyone has any queries, please feel free to add it in the comments. Luca and Conrad will be more than happy to answer them for you. Until you ask the questions, I'll be more than happy to get all my questions answered, as I always get. There is an interesting, I love so much Conrad's story.
Wow.
Can't stop listening to it.
Thank you,
Really
Filippo.
good.
I mean, the fact that I look pink right now, that's not me entirely blushing. There's something going on with my camera, but underneath, I really am. Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to hear.
Okay, so I'll go on with another question while we're still waiting for people to ask more. Luca, Conrad, either of you can start first. What is the most innovative solution you've seen in a Kaggle competition so far? You can give credits and name people if you want.
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah,
There's
If you
so
had to
many.
pick one.
it's really difficult.
I'll go with a few. I don't think I can pick one.
Yeah, that's fine.
Pseudo labeling. which was the thing that essentially that was my gateway drug into contrastive learning and semi-supervised. My sincere apologies to people better than me in this field if I'm abusing the terminology. Basically, for those unfamiliar, if you have a really well-performing model and you want to push it this one final bit on the leaderboard, what you can do is you can generate predictions for the test set, pick those that you are really confident in, and then treat them as if they were genuine labels and not really, really confident guesses. And I mean, it's not surefire way, but it is quite helpful in a lot of situations. I mean, it won't be the groundbreaking thing, but if this is the kind of tight leaderboard that you frequently get in the more popular competitions where you're fighting for the third decimal spot, this might be the difference between, well, medal zone or being probably in one of the worst spots ever, which is one spot below the bronze medal range.
Yeah,
that's one of the most. If you are in the lower 30%, okay, it just wasn't my day. But if you're almost there, but someone beat you literally in like third or fourth decimal spot, oh, that one hurts. That one really hurts.
So yeah, pseudo labeling will do the trick for them. Thanks, Conrad. And Luca, what about you?
Yeah, and pseudo labeling also proves the importance of data, because basically you have more data, right? More data, more power.
Yes.
No matter what algorithm you use. And as far as me, it's as difficult as Conrad to figure out what I can tell, because every competition has something innovative to learn from. But
totally,
I have to mention two things that I personally use in my work, and I found them particularly innovative and particularly useful. One is adversarial validation. It may sound quite easy when you see how it works, but it's fantastic because it helps you to figure out if what you're working with is of the same distribution of what you're expecting to be able to predict. And the other one is one of the topic of our Kaggle workbook, denoising autoencoders. Because not only they were particularly effective in a competition, Porto Seguro competition, which is a topic in our book, but they also prove quite fundamental for all the field of tabular deep learning. Because if you go and see what works in tabular deep learning, is always something that is kind of pre-trained with a semi-labeled supervised, unsupervised method, similar to denoising autoencoders. So for me, these are the top two innovations that I could find useful for my own job in Kaggle. But there are much more that maybe now that I have in mind, but I cannot pull out.
Actually, I can think of one more. You kind of triggered something in my memory when you mentioned things that you first encountered in Kaggle and then they proved useful in your job, and that for me was the arc-face architecture, namely generating embeddings in such a manner that like belongs with like, and not just the embeddings are not only such that it maximizes the softmax, but they actually do belong together. Which is something I'm actually exploring and looking for visual search in my job. I mean, what I loved was that there has been a bunch of architectures over the years that try to achieve something like this. So not merely the mechanic accuracy, does it predict the classes correctly, yada yada, but also does it make sense? Are members of the same class closer together in the embedding space or not? But what I really liked about ArcFace is that it achieved this objective in a much simpler manner than the others. Because the others required much more sophisticated, I don't want to say overcooked, it's marching towards this conversation, architectures. Whereas ArcFace, it's kind of brilliant in its simplicity, that it achieves the same thing.
In fact, Gabriel just commented about your first technique that you mentioned, pseudo labeling. The technique that you talk about is actually sort of regularization. Because of additional data, it's just increased the density of samples in areas where the model is well performing. Thanks for adding more insights, Gabriel. That is always helpful. Uh,
Thank you, sir.
we, we have a first query, by the way.
Mhm.
Aviv inquires, is it necessary to use deep learning with lots of layer to solve Kaggle competition problem?
Depends on competition. For
Yeah.
tabular, no. For time series, no. For NLP, yes. For image, yes. As in, good luck beating performance of a deep learning model on images without deep learning. I mean, good luck using non-deep learning to beat deep learning on image problems. I mean, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. And sometimes we shouldn't forget that having the right augmentation counts much more than having a couple more layers.
Yes, especially with NLP, because let's be honest, with image, import augmentations as A, and then you throw in as much as you can get away with in terms of the CO2 footprint your GPU is generating. But augmentations for text is nowhere near as commoditized as it is for images. I mean, we
Right.
touched on that a little bit in the book, but those are early days. I think we are still have it ahead of us in terms of, it's still ahead of us in terms of someone coming up with a solution as fantastic as augmentations for but for NLP.
Yeah. So from lots of layers, moving on to huge stacks of combined models. Pedro is inquiring about that. What are your thoughts about huge stacks of combined models?
If you can control overfitting, sure. Trouble is, I mean, I love multi-level stacking. Okay, just for the record, I love it. I love the elegance of it. I love that it allows you to mess with different levels of blending and different levels in the hierarchy of what you're stacking. Trouble is, by the very nature of the problem, you're stacking predictors, which means the error accumulates. And you really need to. So, like, to give a simple example, let's say we have 4 basic models in layer 1. We combine them with random forest. And then you combine them once with random forest, and a second you combine them with, I don't know, SVM and an MLP. And then in the second layer of blending, you better regularize this really heavy, because things can go very wrong very quickly. Long story short, love the idea, but you have to really care about regularization.
Yes, and not always works. Sometimes it's better not to
What is
stack,
that?
but to blend. It really depends on the problem. Sometimes variance, what is dominating your problem. Sometimes it's necessary to find a good representation of the data, which is not reachable by feature engineering. So in that case, stacking is essential. But as Coran mentioned, pay attention, because stacking tends to overfit. And the more stacks you pile up, the more risk you are,
Amen to
you are
that.
picking.
So I have a question while we're waiting for more queries to come in. Now, what advice would you give to beginners? Do you think they learn more from improving their ranking at beginner type of competitions, or by moving on to more difficult competitions? How do they improve their ranking?
Depends a little bit on the individual, what would you call it, mental approach. Some people thrive on adversity. Like, okay, I went in, it was an utter disaster, but I have a pretty good idea what went wrong, so I'm gonna do better next time. For some people it works. Clearly, from my facial expression, I'm one of those, but I am very much aware this is not the rule. And some people need a slower, more gentle introduction in order to enable them to grow to their potential. And for those people, I would recommend the beginner competitions first. But it's not a machine learning question. It's almost a psychological one. Which approach works better for you? I mean, and it's not a good one, bad one. People are just different on that. I guess it's sort of a spectrum if you think about it.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, where do you sit? Do you thrive on adversity? It's like, yeah, that motivates me, I'm gonna go for it. Or no, you'd rather say, oh, I figured it out. Okay, I'm ready to make the next step. And then the next one. What works better for you?
I think Kaggle is all about that. It is about consistency, that The more you keep coming back, the more you participate. That's the
Yes.
only time you're going to get better. You're not going to get better
Absolutely.
by putting in 1 day a week or 1 day a month.
Huh, wouldn't that be
Absolutely.
lovely?
Conrad, I completely agree with you. Personally, I started, putting myself on the fire, in my personal experience, or just throwing myself in the lake in order to learn how to swim, how we usually say
No,
also
sink or
here.
swim.
Yeah. But
Totally. Accelerated natural selection.
yes, there's a problem if you start with more challenging things. Probably you are immediately dragged into the more complicated, more sophisticated concepts and technicalities. So you tend to overlook the basic, the fundamentals.
I know.
Sometimes, starting with peaceful, very plain competition for beginners helps you strive on the fundamentals, which later will
Yes.
help you even in the more difficult ones.
Yeah.
If I may augment that one, horrible pun intended. Um, indeed, people seem to fall in love with complexity for complexity's sake, leading to things like somebody's screenshot from Twitter was floating around when someone described a situation which sounds totally plausible based on my experience. He was talking to a candidate about, I don't know, they gave them a use case to filter out, the illiterate ones. Binary classification. And the candidate started with slapping whatever. I think this was pre-transformer, so LSTM or something like this, 2016. And the guy's reaction was like, okay, can we start with a simpler baseline, like a logistic regression with, TF-IDF? Because I think it's a text classification problem. I mean, almost probably spam, non-spam. And the candidate literally with a straight face said, what's TF-IDF? And I'm like, I love deep learning for text, but if you don't even understand what TF-IDF is, like, somebody may have skipped over the basics and, went hopping a little bit too much.
Yeah. It's like, learning embeddings before knowing what one-hot encoding is. And it
Yes.
happened the same in many interviews because if you skip the basics, probably you're losing most often one easy, very straight way to solve a problem, which
Mm.
is probably more relevant for the future than more complex ones. Sometimes we need very complex, sophisticated solutions, like in Kaggle competitions, but sometimes we also need very solid ones that can prove and reprove themselves along the time.
Yes,
And so try yourself on the fire, but don't forget the basics.
exactly.
Speaking of basics and complex methods, Pedro has another question. Should I consider other methods than Bayesian optimization for hyperparameter tuning, or is it enough for most tabular applications?
I'm biased because I'm a fan of Bayesian optimization for hyperparameter tuning. Although, for the record, that's probably the only thing in which I have used anything vaguely Bayesian over the last 10 years. Uh, much as I like the elegance of a lot of those methods, they seem destined on a rendezvous with the, archaeology expedition. Uh, I've been hearing good things about Optuna and HyperOpt, but I think under the hood, if you scratch the jargon away, that's sort of Bayesian stuff anyway. I mean, you look at a high enough abstraction level, what's lasso? It's Bayesian. You're just slapping a prior on your coefficients. Ditto for reach. So I never got entirely convinced by the idea of random search for hyperparameters. Seemed like I'm not super methodologically strict, but that seems to be going a bit far. Long story short, if you have an implementation of Bayesian that's working decently, I'd stick with that. But keep in mind, hyperparameter optimization, that's like towards the end of the pipeline. Maybe not the last thing, but definitely don't start with that.
Yes. And let me spend a word on random optimization, random search
Mhm.
optimization, because basically, Conrad, I found out in many applications when the optimization space is too complex because you have too many hyperparameters, or because the problem is really very complex and very sensible to the parameters that you set on your model. Actually, sometimes Bayesian optimization, if it is not really well started by a large number of random tests, you
Mhm.
risk to end up in a local optimization. So it's a very incredibly good tool, Bayesian optimization, but you need to use sometimes random and to think of running many trials before starting the real Bayesian optimization.
Mhm. Oh, agreed. Although, Tushar, is it just me or did Lucas image just
Yeah,
for freeze?
Yes,
it's
but can you hear me?
Yes, we
yeah,
can.
we can hear you, Luca.
Okay.
It's like we've got
So
deep fake going
something
on.
struck on my side, probably.
Yeah, it's like we've got deep fake video going on, and we had Luca stuck over there, and the voice
As
coming
they
in from the
say,
background.
was it
I think
something we said?
I think he's going to join us back. So
I do sincerely hope so.
yeah, while you're waiting for Luca to join us back, so Dr. Tariq Ahmed is one of the people who's already got his hands on the book on the early copy. Uh,
Just for another version. Yes, I
so he
don't
thought,
know.
are there any plans for another version where you go through more project types? Luca's back. So
Back.
Luca, we were saying that Dr. Tariq Ahmed is a person who's got his hands on the early review copy, and he's enjoying it, and he's inquiring if there are any plans for another version where you go through more project types, example, transformers for summarization.
Well, yes and no. Yes. Well, actually, yes. Yes, for plans for another version. Yes, on more project types. Transformers for summarization, while cool as an idea, I'm struggling a little bit to connect it with the context of Kaggle competitions. That's sort of the challenge I'm facing here. And I mean,
Yeah.
if this is supposed to still be called Kaggle Book, then I think we should maintain a degree of connection of what's happening in the competitions.
Yeah. It's a really hot topic, but
It is.
at the moment we don't have too much connection with Kaggle issues.
All right, fair enough. Uh, so seven Adhikari inquires how to handle data sets with large number of categorical features.
Bin them, bin them. Go through the columns, identify the lowest at whatever percent of categorical values that have only whatever occur once or occur twice. Lump them all under other. That's like a first step regularization on such a potentially hugely messy space. That's one thing. And then if you can get it, if you can live with yourself in terms of CO2 footprint from your GPU, just run a brutal feature selection. See what you can get away with, because the chance of, if you have whatever 300 categorical features, the chances that all 300 of them are actually relevant, informative, and useful, more theoretically possible, but not very likely.
Also, a good approach would be to use target encoding, but you would be losing any association between the categorical features. So you had to figure out if you had to create some interaction before between them.
Well, the
Among
issue is a large number of categorical features to you. So, large squared by half because we took interactions.
Yeah, because actually, if you're just go for feature selection, you have in any case to process, right, the categorical
True.
features. Probably the
True.
problem is I'm going to use one-hot encoding. I will have a very large sparse matrix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's another manner. If you have lots of categorical features and the data set itself is large, I know I'm bringing up a blast from the past, but look at something like Vopal. So Vopal Wabbit. I know, right?
Very incredibly good suggestion, correct.
I mean, I know, right?
Yeah.
Luca, tell me you didn't feel younger just because I mentioned that name in terms of going back in memories.
Yeah, going back to the old days.
I know, right? What's the advantage of this one? To continue with your question, Sabine, Vopal processes things in a sequential manner, so you don't care. It takes care of any interactions that you feel like quadratic, third degree, cubic, and it processes and regularizes them on the go. Which means You don't particularly. I mean, okay, even with Vopal, a little bit of help, a little bit of pre-processing, as in lumping together the really, really infrequent ones, usually helps.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not help an awful lot, but it certainly won't hurt. So to summarize, regularize what's going on inside the features themselves by lumping the really infrequent ones into something called other, the rest, whatever. Consider interactions and consider some form of online learning. Again, my weapon of choice being Vopal, but there are other solutions that aim to achieve the same thing.
What about it? Online learning and hashing trick. Wow.
Oh yes. One more thing. I mean, with special shout out to Mr. John Langford and his crew at Microsoft, because I believe this is where Vopal is currently maintained. By specifying the size of your hashing table, you are putting an upper limit on your memory consumption, so you can control it a priori. And my use case is a 50 gigabyte text file processed, which I handled with Vopal on a machine with 4 gigabyte of RAM, and it worked. So it's been a while ago, so the definition of what constitutes big data has changed somewhat, probably by adding an exponent here and there, but it works. The principle is still sound.
Okay. Before we move ahead, let's conduct the first raffle. Anyone who hasn't taken part in the raffle yet, please do it by commenting #packed in the comments. We'll do our first one now and first one closer to the end. Share screen. Where is it? Yeah. Wow, look at that. Only 5 people have entered the draw. So all the best to all the 5 people. And anyone who still hasn't, all the best. So let's see who our first winner is. Amima.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Amima. In fact, I was going to ask your questions next, Amima. Congratulations on being the first winner. Please drop me a message on LinkedIn. I will ensure that you get your e-copy. Please don't forget, drop me a message on LinkedIn. Now, we'll move on to your question next. So Amima also had a query. How much time do you recommend on solving and learning new concepts and applying for participants?
Depends on the concept. Like, I've been messing with transformers for a while, and I honestly can't say I understand them as well as I would like to. At least certainly not on a level that I understand RNN or LSTM, which is also one of the reasons I still haven't released the time series episode on transformers. Because before I start explaining things to people, I think it would be good manners if I were confident in my own understanding first. Common decency. But the question is, well, you can start applying a tool without really understanding what it does. Like, you don't need to fully be able to explain in utterly non-technical language how a BERT works. Because, like, explaining to a non-technical person, that to me shows you really, really get it from a technical angle. If you can explain it in a non-technical manner, you don't really need to understand BERT that well to start using it for instance, text classification problems. You need to have some understanding on the basic mechanics. Well, how to take a BERT head, swap it with a classification one, load weights, pre-train, blah blah blah. But that's not a BERT. That's not a transformer specific problem. So, as long as you grab some sort of solution and you are able to replicate and you do understand what's going on, even it's like Andrew Neil says, if you don't understand it, don't worry. And that's one of the most frequent phrases he uses in his deep learning course. Bless his heart.
He also said that if you know linear regression, you are knowing 80% of Silicon Valley's secret techniques for machine learning. Anyway, it was 2013.
Based on the horror I've witnessed, I gazed into the abyss of what professional business is doing. You know what? He's not that wrong.
We are in 2023.
You really think a decade makes so much difference? Swimming to shore, how much time? As much as you need, but not much more. In terms of, okay, I can to stick with the Transformers example. I know how to load a transformer. I know how to slap a head on top of it, geared for my classification problem. I know how to start tuning it. That's enough to get you started. And as you progress, you're gonna hit blocks at some point, and that's when you're gonna go like, okay, I'm getting error around tokenizer. I think I need to go back and actually reread so I understand properly what the tokenizer does. It will come organically. But what helps in terms of getting a first pass, even when you don't fully understand the whole thing, is that it gives you a feeling, okay, I got it working. Few things beat, maybe not quite euphoria, but the warm fuzzy feeling at least of 3 hours ago, I had no idea what this does. This looked like black magic to me. Now I put it together. It's working. It's producing a prediction. It might not be gold medal material yet, but it's working. The kick it gives you in terms of motivation to go further, it's fantastic. So don't deny it to yourself for too long.
Yeah.
And I would add also consistency, because you need time to understand complex concepts. And especially if you are learning through a competition, and the competition has a certain time span, and you are just focusing on the peculiarities of competitions, when the competition has ended, probably there's another one or there's another problem work, and you just, get away from the concepts and the new ideas you started learning. So consistency is very important. You should take on what you have started learning through Kaggle or in preparation of a Kaggle competition. For example, doing projects of your own or trying to apply the same things you learn in your work projects or your study projects. So even if you don't have too much time to spend on something, if you do consistently for a long period, that will make the difference, at least in my experience.
Luca, just to continue with that, there is another question because you mentioned consistency. There is another question, and this one is on YouTube. Do we have to be picky about which Kaggle competition to join and compete based on our background and chance to win? Or should we just compete in as much as we could concurrently?
First one, then the other. No, I mean, seriously. Sorry, I shut up. I promise you take the next one as the first.
So this one seems to appeal a lot to you, Conrad.
Oh yeah, because I came through that road. I literally had to answer the question to myself. I would say start, if you are beginning, start with multiple ones and don't bother about the fact that you tried four in parallel and you're gonna be absolutely horrible in free. Doesn't matter. You go through that cycle a couple of times, you'll figure out, okay, I have, because like going mechanically through things is one thing. At some point to get really good at it, you have to develop a little bit more than just the mechanical skill. It'll be like, I don't know, maybe for it will be images. You're gonna go like, okay, I see this bunch of images in this competition. That's probably the kind of augmentation we need. This should work. This one is a waste of time. Whereas you stare at an NLP problem and you go like, I don't know which way is up. Or maybe it will be the other way around. Or maybe time series is totally your thing. The only way to find out, go for a couple of cycles, and then you see what works for you. So if you're beginning, I would start, go for broke. It will become clear to you what works better, which way your strengths. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'll be the David Hilbert of machine learning, and you're gonna demolish everything that you touch. Good for you. But for me, it was not the case. For me, specializing a little bit helped.
I would also add, Conrad, that it's important to spend your time on what interests you most. So if you have any reason to prefer, for example, natural processing competitions in respect of tabular or image ones, you should absolutely go for what most interests you, because it will give you an edge in learning. because you are motivated, more motivated.
Yeah.
That makes quite a difference. You learn more, you perform more than the standard, and you get obviously better results if the competition is motivating you. So don't underestimate also your own internal motivation. Safe.
I agree with that. And the metaphorical way that I could connect that would be uh, workout. Uh, Doctor suggested one of like my wife a couple of years ago that she should take up exercises, and then she had to figure out what sort of exercise does she like. She joined the gym, but she kept on quitting it. But then later on, after a certain amount of point in time, she realized that she liked playing badminton. So she's consistent with badminton. So you find whatever your liking is, and that will ensure that you're more and more consistent with that. So I agree with that. Um, I'm just mindful of time, and there are quite a few questions, so I'll just move on to the next one.
Nice.
Pedro inquires, what is the most underrated evaluation metric?
Underrated.
Underrated.
The other way around.
I have
Uh,
one in my mind.
Go.
Should I go?
Yeah, yeah.
Normalized Gini index.
Isn't that like AUC that shaved and put at
Yeah,
a time?
yeah.
Okay. Oh, that wasn't my choice at all. I wasn't.
What are your
I would
thoughts
have,
about it,
I would have
Conrad?
gone with Matthew's correlation.
Okay,
Thoughts?
we'll come back to this later on.
Yeah,
Uh, okay, Sabine has another query.
it's
How to
up to
handle
decide.
We can have an opinion poll.
Yeah.
Conrad is used to commenting about overrated things rather than underrated, so he's never thought of it that way.
Hey, that's not true. That's so not true. You hurt my feelings.
Okay, Sabir inquires how to handle date time features, how to pre-process year values such that the model knows the relationship between years, months, days, etc.
PD dot to date time. That would be the first part of my answer. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude, but that's really the first step. Relationship between years, months, and days. Tricky unless you specifically encode a relationship between columns. Because presumably by something like a relationship between years and months, you mean something actually between years and months. I don't know. No, Sabine, if you could elaborate a little more as a follow-up to that question, what do you mean by relationship between years and months, for instance? Because relationship between days, that I can answer. You can just take care of encoding it, well, by numbers, as a numerical feature, for instance. Although that's a tricky one, I think. And the question is, in how many models does it really matter that Tuesday comes before Wednesday?
Right. The same thing so that the model knows the importance of those features.
Encode everything and throw it into a model that generates some sort of feature importance. That would be the first step. It won't tell you which ones matter, but put it this way. It usually doesn't, model like feature importance method can give you some false positives. Something can pop up as relevant when it is not, but it will very, very rarely give you false negatives. So if something shows up as irrelevant, it's probably pretty safe to discard it. So, and that always helps with shrinking the size of your feature space.
There he's spoken about it. Relationship between months mean month one comes after 12, and how does the model know it?
Probably is alluding to trigonometric transformations. So you have a continuous.
Nice. I like. Go on.
We talk about it in our, TensorFlow cookbook, but that's another book.
That's another
which we also had something to do. We're kind of involved in that one.
That's another
we'll send you all the relevant links after the session, so you can have a look. I think there's a lot online about the trigonometric sine, cosine transformation. So You just divide your date, your time, whatever you want to model by the range of time. For example, you have hours, you divide by 24 hours, and then you apply the trigonometric transformations.
I
And
think
by using two features, you can just draw a continuum of your time for your model to understand.
Continuum of time. I love it.
Because basically you are just mapping the time, on a circle.
I just love it. That sounds like philosophy dropped in the middle of a science fiction show or physics class.
And it's perfect for gradient boosting, right?
Really?
Because it's parceling space, and you are just refiguring your time as a circle, and you just take the portion.
I love it. Somewhere
and it works greatly.
Listen, somewhere in hell, Hegel, with his thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and the spiral of history, somewhere in hell, Hegel is laughing. And no, Tushar, this is not me riffing. He really had a concept of spiral of history. I did not make that up.
Yeah, I'm going back in history as well.
Good.
To remind you of this question. What is the most underrated evaluation metric, Conrad?
Matthew's
You want to
correlation.
come back to it later.
Yeah, but we talk about it in the Kaggle book.
No,
Yeah.
seriously,
Yes.
to attempt to reduce hilarity, Pedro, I would say for me, Matthew's correlation, because it really captures a lot of what we into. You throw a problem with two strings of numbers at someone. What's number one intuition people are gonna have? Slap a correlation. Except regular correlation, it's pretty much built for elliptical distributions, namely things that if you have the mean and the variance, you know all there is to know. That's obviously nonsensical and very, very tricky to interpret if you look at things that can only take 0-1 values. Matthew's correlation is kind of trying to bring the convenience of using Pearson correlation to binary value targets. I think there was at least one or two competitions with that on Kaggle in the last couple of years. I can't remember which ones.
Yeah, there are a couple ones.
Right.
Let
So
me
before
take
we,
the Kaggle book. I can tell you exactly.
wow, I actually thought that he picked something out of space. That's what it looked
I mean,
like.
he was the one who wanted to partition space, right? So that was quite fitting.
Yes.
So, okay, we will wait for Conrad to go through it.
So it's on page 121, and it mentioned VSB power line fault detection. I remember that competition has been
Power line faults.
yeah. We had a 5th place solution, and we didn't choose it. Oh, that's very painful to remember. And the Bosch production line performance. That's the two ones when Matthew correlation coefficient has been used as a metric in a
Bosch, I remember.
Yeah.
Luca, that was a very smart way of plugging in and referencing your own book and your own chapter. You just picked it out of space. And then
I'm always ready.
Do you know what, Tushar? If there's a recording of this one, I think what we need to do is cut out some segments and make them like, I don't know, TikTok shorts or something, or TikTok videos or YouTube shorts. It's like Luca reaching out to space.
Yes, but Carl, we should avoid TikTok.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, US deemed that it's not good to have TikTok installed in your phones. You have to disinstall it.
Oh, I don't. But the thing about TikTok, I'm trying to figure out how to use it in the browser.
Okay.
So that's the whole point here.
So in short, Pedro, to answer your question, it's the answer to your question is in the Kaggle book, page 112. It's a chapter written by Luca, and in his own words, if you go back, he just referenced himself. So I'll ask you all the last question because we are wary of time, and then we will do the final draw. So Luca, Conrad,
sorry.
Yeah. Luca has another meeting to go into, and it's quite an important one, he said. Oh, you forgot about it. Glad I remembered. Okay.
It was a movie.
So what gives anyone an edge in competitions? Is there a particular tip or a hint that gives people an edge in competitions?
Well, I'm assuming we're talking about people who are not called Chris Deot or Giba. Okay, so talking about the rest of mankind, what gives you an what? I mean, those are the facts. Chris is the closest we have to a bona fide rockstar these days, and a nice one at that. That doesn't happen with rockstars a lot. Luca, go ahead.
Um, Personally, I would go for experimentation, right? So
Mm,
in the end, okay, if you ask me just abruptly, I will tell you the basics. So you should do cross validation correctly, but it's not always the case that cross validation is what you need in your competition. Because, for example, you had too many cases, you had to go for a test, and so on. So, what stays after we take out the tabular competition, the characteristic of competition? What stays is ability to experiment fast. So my general suggestion is always one: go for the discussion, look for new ideas, and try everything as fast as you can. Which means to know how to leverage your resources. You may have your own computer, you may have access to the cloud, you may use smartly Kaggle notebooks. It doesn't matter. Leverage the resources you have in order to test as fast as possible what you think could work. And that's everything. There's nothing more. Your ability to test, retest, try new ideas, and improve your rankings.
Yeah, I'm looking at Conrad. He's got a smart smile over there. So, do
It
you
was,
agree with
there's
that?
something to add.
Yeah, I saw
seriously,
that.
Mag, I was trying to look supportive.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Okay.
So, Conrad, any thoughts on that?
Good thing I have a job, because if I were to become an actor, my future would have been pretty bleak. I agree, of course, with what Luca mentioned. The ability to experiment quickly and go through iterations of the model, versions, super crucial. Because if you want to try a few ideas, you don't want to have to wait, I don't know, 6 hours or however long a full-blown model trains on your machine. That's one thing. Second thing, it's not so much an edge, but something that can save you the time. Don't rush into a competition before you've had a look around with submissions, because sometimes, I don't know, a leak is found or there's a weird stuff going on. No, I mean, Santander
Yeah,
is gone.
it happens. It happens. And it's very, it's
I know.
terrible. You
It's
invest
like
a lot
Steam.
and suddenly a leak or a magic future appear.
Santander competition is not real. It cannot hurt you anymore. That's what I keep telling myself. Yes.
Yes, only your dreams it can harm to you.
That's the 3 a.m. one screaming. Yes.
It's night
That-
when it's more like.
Yeah, something along those lines. But yeah, on a minimally more serious note, that's the idea. Look around what's going on, because maybe the competition just isn't for you. Maybe it's not for anybody, because it smells like a leak is gonna show up. If, like, I don't know, it's log loss and someone has 0.00001 after 2 days. Well, either you met an utter genius who demolished everything, or someone found a leak or a magic feature or some such. Doesn't happen that much these days, so that's a good thing. But definitely pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And practice, at the risk of repeating myself from our previous session when we're talking about Kaggle Book, practice, and then practice some more, because what this will give you, at some point you will have accumulated a sort of code base, for lack of a better term, of boilerplate. This is tabular validation. This is image generator in Keras. This is whatever, early stopping in PyTorch, those kinds of things. And there's a new competition coming in, and they go like, right, so okay, I don't need to rewrite it from scratch. I have the code. I can adapt the old code. This will shorten your time to development immensely.
All right. Let's move on to the final raffle that we have. So the first raffle winner was Amima. if I remember well. Yes, it was Amima
Yes.
Shukla. Let's do another raffle. In case it picks up Amima again, we will redo it. What's Amima going to do with 2 ebooks? Anji Babu Vanka. So Anji,
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
please get in touch with me. Congratulations. Please drop me a connection request or a note on LinkedIn, and I'll ensure that you and Amima uh, get your e-copy for the Kaggle workbook. Congratulations to all the winners. And oh wow, that's quite a kind comment by Nikita's. I'm really happy that you
Thank you
found
very
it.
much, Nikita.
And yeah,
Thank
thanks a
you.
lot for that. And thanks a lot, everyone, for your time. Any last notes or any closing notes, Luca, Conrad?
Never give up, no matter how many. I mean, everybody is gonna hit a moment. I'm doing so great. This is my golden medal moment. Right, 600 drop on the leaderboard. Cause I missed this one thing. It will happen to everyone at some point.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Don't
mean,
never be discouraged.
I used to work with this Greek guy who always said that in order to become a fully developed person, you need to really mess up, like real bad, at least once, because it forms you as a human being. It's sort of true. It's sort of true in a bunch of spheres of life, including this one.
Yeah.
Any
Never be
closing words?
discouraged. Insist
Never.
and trust your gut sometime. The idea that can make you win or place in the top maybe is just under your eyes.
Hmm.
Many times, what made the difference was just under my eyes and I couldn't see it. Maybe I didn't experiment much. Maybe I didn't trust my CV validation score. Another error you shouldn't do, please. And trust yourself, insist, enjoy. That's
And
the most
remember,
important thing.
and remember what Luca mentioned: the adversarial validation. That
Yeah.
seriously is your friend in many Kaggle competitions.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Conrad, Luca.
Thank you
And
very
thank
much.
you, everyone,
See
for
you.
attending. The winners, please get in touch with me on LinkedIn and I'll get you your e-copy. All right, then. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone, and have an amazing
Thanks,
weekend.
everyone.
See you. Bye bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.